record on this computer. Okay, so what I'll do now, folks, is I will also mute you if I can find the mutant thing. Okay. Yeah, I'm not kidding. They changed many. Okay, here we go. I'm muting all of you. Parents, first of all, or on yourself. What are the general impacts that have gotten to you in your lifetime? I mean, I would always put up COVID for myself. I would always put up all the presidents and the changes of uh, various administrations. That to me is that's just what you do. I would put up the St. Helens earthquake in the early 80s because that really impacted Great Falls and it impacted me in my job. So be aware of those generational impacts and add those in. In fact, add them into your own timelines right now. One of the things, though, that I can tell you that has made a huge impact on the way in which I research is this fan club thing, or, someone else might call it cluster research, because it really increases your likelihood of getting great info about your people. So when you start researching that particular ancestor or that particular family, start making a list, your very own list, which I hope you handwrite because it helps you to remember it. Make a list of the ancestors as you find their friends in newspapers, etc., or acquaintances. Make a list and put those down. I'm going to show you how to go after people-rich data because this is the particular strategy that does that when you really fully enter into using fan club research. That fan club, it's family and associates or friends or whatever. Sometimes when somebody says, hey, Jan, what's that fan club? I start with the F for friend, knowing that it really stands for two, family and friends, associates and neighbors. Elizabeth Schoen Mills is an genealogist extraordinaire. She has quite a series of presentations out at legacy.com if you belong to that. Or if you don't, you might want to go out and look to see if any of her things are free out there. But she's such a good researcher. When you listen to her and you say, and she says she's been researching some things for 50 years, it'll kind of help slow you down. It's kind of that patience grasshopper moment in our lives. Because she points out the significance of not only searching records for an ancestor's surname, but paying attention to all those friends around them, because any of that historical information is like real estate. The true value of any piece of information is unknown until it's put into the community context. Now, for you, your families, and your ancestors that you're researching, that is particularly true. You will get so much more when you research in the community context. And you must be aware of this at all times, instead of saying, oh, goody, I just got one thing. What's the next? It's extraordinary. When you think about it, we employ fan club strategies and we go for data-rich material. We're looking at every single document differently and looking at the number of people we can add in that fan club. Also, the people who encircle your ancestor, relatives, friends, acquaintances, the casual one-times, which I believe I've told you about in terms of my niece that I gained by DNA with one of those casual one-time encounters that my brother had. But enough about that. Neighbors, even the ones we have battles with, you can get lots of information about your family and how they feel about a particular community event or community problem just by looking at those neighborhood battles. You'll find them in the court records. When you think in fan club terms, you're going to investigate people found in documents differently, or at least I hope you do, because boy, this one really helps. So you're going to go for the data-rich stuff. Now, during this year when I've been presenting, I've been telling you and showing you about a lot of different kinds of documents. And most all of them are data rich if you know how to use them in a data rich way. For example, I have people come in and say, Jan, which document should I get first? Should I go for that birth certificate? Nope, that one might be tough. If you've already got it, that's great. And if you happen to get into a database bank or you know where that particular document is, good for you. I tend to go for marriage documents if they're available, and they're a great first step because you're going to find the marriage partner names along with the maiden name. Get that one. You're going to find potentially, if you're looking at the actual license that people get to marry. And remember, there's two different documents there. There's the actual marriage document, and then there's the license. Hopefully, you get the license too. You'll see the parents' full names, hopefully, and maiden names again. You might see brothers, you might see sisters, cousins, significant friends, church affiliations for where they were married, or maybe it was in a justice court. Birth docs, you may find them, but you have to watch for the era and be aware of the state laws because you may only find a birth doc in the newspaper. That's all I've ever found for my mom in a North Dakota newspaper. Haven't found that registration birth certificate yet. Be aware of delayed birth certificates. My mom used an entirely different fact to get her delayed birth certificate. She used school attendance to prove that she was birthed, as she said. So knowing where the places are, not only the names, but getting those places and locations down are important. While you're getting those places down, remember, largely in the Midwest to the West, counties are very important. As you get to larger population areas in the East, sometimes the county has been replaced by a particular city or whatever where documents are cared for. And with death certificates, I'm going to tell you, look at every line. Well, I'll tell you, look at every line with marriage docs and birth docs too. Record every single thing. Find out who that informant was for the death certificate. That's that family member that gave some information. If you've got only the hospital as an informant, be aware of the fact that you're going to have to go after way more data. You can look at obituaries. Be aware of the fact that there may be competing obituaries every once in a while, with family members putting their own information in when they feel that someone else forgot to put that information in. It doesn't happen very often, but I have seen them right here in Great Falls newspapers. Remember the baptisms and the christenings and record all the names in their role. Or if you're at a church like that is an Anabaptist church or like Church of the Nazarene, be aware of the fact that they do have records, although they don't record particular baptisms or christenings. So watch for the type of church records that will be available and use the appropriate terms. If you just ask for a baptism or a christening in, for instance, a Baptist church, you might find that they don't do those early baptisms, they do them later. So clarify yourself and ask if perhaps they have family pages where they've recorded things about attendance at least or whatever, because you're going to find relatives there. This is all really data rich because guess what? Your friends and neighbors and acquaintances attended or were in on those very same events. More data-rich documents. Now, these are fun. Divorce. Get the facts, including the original marriage date, the numbers of marriages. Sometimes they fib about that, even on state records. Their parents, the number of kids, and anyone else named if that divorce gets to is in a state that allows people to sue for different kinds of divorces. Watch for the incomplete divorces. Sometimes you're going to see in the newspaper when you plug a name in that a person might apply at intervals and seek a divorce several times before actually getting one of those. Yep, I've seen those. I have one of my aunts who sought a divorce from her same spouse several times, and she finally got a divorce in a different state. But I got that one too. Yeah, you can frequently, if you go to the courthouse and ask for any documents about a divorce, they may show you some of the incomplete ones too. It just depends on who's doing that searching for you. If you're doing your own searching, that's great. Coroner records and inquests and death inquiries. Note that information, all of it again on the death certificate. And I'm going to give you a big hint right now. Look to see who signed at the bottom and sent the information to the state for final recording. If it isn't the doctor, look for the signature of the coroner or a coroner assignee and get that next document. That means there will be a coroner record of some kind available, or there could be. Look carefully at your state laws. Most states pay attention to a model law format, and many of them will have things where they are actually looking for those people. And some more people rich docs, wills, all the names, and research each name, because wills are not only going to name who should be eligible to be in a will for or recognized by the person who is writing the will, but they may also specifically exclude some people, or you're going to see in their witnesses who the people are that are going to take care of the probate later on. So you're going to watch both wills and probates. You're going to watch who was there, including the judge, for naturalizations and for citizenship documents. And if you don't find these documents, you can at least remember to find the indirect evidence of these in censuses, several of them, in fact. That's where you want to always have your mind on, and you need that little book on censuses that will tell you which ones did these questions. The censuses in all countries. Yeah, there were more countries than us that did those censuses. For instance, Italy did them far earlier than we did. These provide time and place always. England censuses will always provide information down to the actual birth date for a person and where that birth occurred. If you get an original for a census, remember to look at the neighbors who are on the same sheet as your family, because they're the neighbors that live next to your ancestor, and they will be the family friends. When you can't find information about your ancestor, you can research that neighbor and find out what's going on. Maybe your ancestor didn't put very much in the newspaper, but those neighbors did, I bet. And that's that community gossip column. These provide that community context that we are looking for and that Elizabeth Mills tells us about, even when your ancestor is not mentioned. Look at those community things that are going on, because those are the things that your family probably participated in, knew about, or they were impacted by. And of course, any directories of all types. Although I'm going to say again, when you're looking at directories in the countryside, in rural areas, sometimes you don't get great descriptions. So you're going to have to go to land descriptions out at Glow Records to see what the land descriptors are for that particular area. So you can look up something like a Big Sandy, Montana, and actually get the township and the range and so on for it. And then you can begin to look at that out at Glow Records and see who was there in the past. Strategies to use basic to this kind of research, to these kind of things, is seeking docs you know should be available for the relevant time period. Don't look for a birth certificate back before about 1900 in the West. Most states, even if they had birth certificates before that, did not actually require them. So I try those marriage records first because I score so many names in them. I look at the state laws because I don't want to waste my time looking for a document that was never available. So I might have to look at the Pennsylvania laws and see the laws in Pennsylvania in 1840 to see what that looks like. Luckily, those things are available to us out online for free. Again, be mindful and record all the facts found. Record all the people, not just that one person. I'm going to tell you about a guy that we had in here who came in on Saturdays faithfully for a couple of years and looked carefully at records on the computer, recorded his family, and then finally told me he was done. And I said, "Oh, let me see." I kid you not. He had concentrated only on the males in his family. So he hadn't bothered to get the maiden names for their spouses. He hadn't managed to look at their families to see if the family tie or the family connection was closer on the maternal side. He did spend another year or two here after I explained to him, what he was missing and helped him with a few records so that he knew what he might find. There's just nothing like success, folks. Make that timeline, add the facts in. If you're going to record a marriage or a death or whatever, note everybody in that marriage and their roles. You may not know their impact at that particular time, but pay me now or pay me later. You may have to go back and look at it again. Go back right now, in fact, and look at some of your things because you're missing some of those relatives and some of those great neighbors and the closer than relative people in your ancestor's life. And find that background report on the locality of your ancestor. You can find it out at Family Search just by searching for the county. And then within the county, looking to see what they have in records and about that county in Family Search. You can, of course, use AI today to do this, but beware. Sometimes AI adds some things that might not be true or might be stretching it. So goals plus strategies equal mindful progress and success, at least for me. And I'm going to tell you again, pay me now or pay me later. You need a plan and a goal. Start small with that goal. It can be, okay, I want to know the birth, death, marriage for this particular ancestor. And I'm giving that as an example because until about 25 years ago, that's mainly what we did as at least first steps, because getting the birth, the marriage, the death, those were big things when you had to write away for information. But you can do way more now. So you want to investigate all the things going on during your person's lifetime. And of course, you can add in those newspapers. But that goal and that plan, don't just say you want to find out everything. Tell me where you want to find it in your plan. I plan to look in newspapers. I'm going to look online at Ancestry to see what might be available for my state. You get the idea. You need to put down your actual plan for where you're searching. Otherwise, you're just lost. That cluster or fan club research is going to show your research and your search beyond one person. Let me tell you about Norway. Boy, did I fall into some neat data. I was researching my grandfather Beck's family, and I've talked about him before. But in Norway, I found the ability, honestly, to get at least 8 facts for each person just by going back through the church records, because the church records were the actual state records for Norway until about 5 or 6 years ago. So you're going to be able to note while you're looking at these records all the deaths occurring right around the death of your ancestor. When you get into something like Icelandic records, you get into Norwegian records, Denmark, Sweden to a different extent again, because they have even more. But I found births and christenings on the same page. Immunizations, yep, the state took care of those and put it in the church record. The confirmations, the marriages, the promises of marriage, the in-flights, that is people going out of the area, and the ut flights, that is people coming in, and the deaths, and all kinds of things there. I could write about the afflictions as an important side note, because it wasn't just my ancestor who died as a 10-year-old, or ancestor's sister, I should say, who died as a 10-year-old. She had several friends who died too, all of them at school age. Wonder where they got exposed. Get the above facts for every person in the generations you find and look carefully and differently at each generation. Each generation has impacts on it. You need to record the type of impact you expect to find in those newspapers. Were they a generation where they were in a war? Look at that greater generation that is now passing us by for World War II. Don't take any shortcuts. Don't leave anyone out. You'll be sorry. You need to go back and look at those friends. Think about your goals. Don't limit yourself to one fact at a time, because that's not going to be a good use. In timeline background, I have people who just put in information about their ancestor. That's not pleasing enough. You need the befores and the afters. You need all of the information you find about their families. What about that sibling who died? Did you get the actual obituary, or at least a little death notice? I include those right in my timeline. I insert those. Some of my timelines are 40 and 50 pages long as a result, but boy, are they really good for informing me again about what I've previously researched. I want that time, place backgrounder. You can use Family Search. You also want to use things like Bill Dollarhide's map books, so that you get all the relevant county changes. You know, Montana started out with 6 counties, and today we have 56. Other states and other countries are very, very similar. So you want to get those backgrounders and say when the records change, because you may think that you found all the information there is. And in reality, the place where they are at that point suddenly changed into another county place, and you're going to go seek the information in that new county. Or say you're in the new county, you're aware of the family having lived there for quite some time. Now you're going to want to go back to that previous county. Flathead County's previous county was Missoula. I had to go look there for a lot of data for early families. Investigate the types of records you're going to need. I've given you a bunch, and then it's your task to go find them. Very little, really, frankly, is online. What Cheryl and I call the low-hanging fruit is there. That is, a lot of marriages are there. That's a good place to go, at least for an initial look. Births, if they're beyond the 75 to 100 year mark, you might find those in states. But you're still going to have to do a lot of your research right in that county where they settled, or where they stayed, or where they were in the time that you are researching. So you need to know about that county and what records it has. Luckily, you can go to Family Search and find that. You can actually also just use AI or go out to Google and research records, state records for a particular state or a particular country. And one other thing, have you verified what you already think you know? Was there somebody who did your family research beforehand, so you think you don't need to go back through it? There may be secrets, or there may be someone else's point of view about what they knew. Research and look carefully about what you've already been given. So I want to show you just a couple of goals. In Norway, of course, for my grandpa, the Norway records made this one easy. My intended goal, and I did write my life story, and I did publish a life story of my great grandmother and great grandfather Beck for my niece views. I included the births, the marriages, the deaths, all the facts I found in those Norway records that were so fantastic. And by the way, they are free. Their immigration to Minnesota, including brief stories of their 6 children and spouses, and the 20 years they spent in Minnesota, the important events in their lifetimes, their move on to North Dakota when the younger boys needed to find homesteads, and then homesteading up in Saskatchewan, Canada as well. Uh, I tried to get everything I could and report and start at least with one brief paragraph if you don't know very much, because you're going to increase your knowledge. And then you can go back to that paragraph. A paragraph becomes a page or a couple of pages or even more. And especially if you have things like family letters or things like that. Now, on the other hand, we all have my dad's family. Still haven't found that grandfather of mine uh, that impregnated my great grandfather, I should say, that impregnated my grandfather's mom, uh, even with having my DNA at 5 or 6 places. Yeah, I'm still optimistic. So here on the Lee side, I'm going to write a life story. It's continuing. It's not all done, including birth, marriage, death for all the things, salient facts, places people lived, past generations for each grandparent where possible, and important events. Uh, my grandma's immigration from Silesia, I did find that. And it was a neat thing because she arrived in Baltimore, Maryland on the day that people up in New York were dedicating that Statue of Liberty. So I could record the moves to Montana, homesteading for this family. And then there was Aunt Norma, who wrote about a lot of family secrets that needed to be proven or discounted because her version of the Lee family history certainly sounded a lot more interesting than mine. So I looked at primary and original records, and I attempted to use all the facts. And in using all the facts, it's been just like 16 years this year, maybe 18 years this year, that I found something wonderful when I finally got the actual marriage license for my grandfather, who was surnamed Eskew at that time because he hadn't changed his surname yet. Anyway, their marriage in Great Falls, Montana on April 29th, 1905. And now I'm going to have you in your documents turn to pages 6, 7, 8, where you will see the actual document that I found, because it's exciting to me. I hope it's exciting to you, because it was not until I found that document, that marriage license for the county of Cascade for Oscar L. Eskew and his bride, Mary Nanick, that I actually found the maiden name for my grandpa's mom. I found her name, Mary Coglizer. Now, I cannot tell you how many thousand Coglizers I have found as a result, but until then, I did not have good firm data as to what her original name was. I was using Eskew, her married name, because that's what I found in a newspaper, and it just announced the Eskew marriage, and that they were Mr. and Mrs. Eskew. So if you know the relationships, write a paragraph right away. It'll be a brief one. It can be brief, but it's very important because you see, before that, the only thing that I'd had was on the next page, the marriage certificate. I'd known about that. But I hadn't researched any of these names. I knew that Oscar changed his name, and I knew his wife was Mary Nanick. I hadn't researched Walter Brotherton. I hadn't researched Estelle Eskew. I figured that might be Oscar's sister. I was pretty sure. But I wasn't sure because I didn't know how many marriages both of those people had had in that prior to that SQ marriage, or if there had been any marriages. I knew that my grandfather was illegitimate before that. This gave me a whole new path. So turning back and showing you there what that led to, that led to, well, so far my Cogleiser timeline is 39 pages long. And I've been able to research that family back to about 1722 in the United States. And over in the Netherlands, I've been able to research them for 6 years before that. That was rich. I always do my Snoopy dance. I'll never stop doing that when I get an original or a primary certificate. I always make a copy right away. I never write on a primary piece of evidence. Now, maybe you wouldn't write on a piece of evidence, but sometimes since I make a copy, I write my questions right on there because I'm going to note how many pieces of information are on that document. If there's only 4, then I'm going to note that number, the number, and I'm going to make up a question for myself, which is answered by the info in the blank, so that I know I am concentrating fully on the information I have been given. Otherwise, I'll forget it. And maybe 3 years later, I would look at it and suddenly notice information that was new to me just because I wasn't paying attention and I didn't have a plan for the way in which I approached that piece of evidence. Record each person in a database of some kind. If you're working on paper, you can write your paragraphs, you can record each person. Even though I work in a database as I record these people, I always have a notebook at hand. And for my fan club, I have pages. For Oscar, my grandfather, I have pages of information about his friends and neighbors and his acquaintances and his lawsuits back in Choteau and Hill counties before he ever came to Lake County, Montana. So I have a couple of pages of people that he encountered, and I just use tick marks for the times that I find that he's encountered a person or been around a person or a person is mentioned. And of course, I record the information from the tick mark also. So you're going to record the witnesses to a wedding, the minister or the priest or the judge. The person's purpose within that document was this person, the informant on a death document. Then you're going to want to record that and immediately say, who was this person and what was their relationship to my ancestor? Make notes and write those questions. I write them right into my extensive timelines because it's easy for me to write questions when I've got a blank page right across from my timeline. I scribble everything there and make my notes on what I'm going to research next and what type of document it is. And write that brief summary, cite your evidence, and go get those friends, especially because if people move to a new place, their friends and the people surrounding them and the organizations or clubs they belong to become a new type of family unit for them. You need to look at this very seriously. Oh, of course, we're all searching backward, I hope, very, very carefully. It's very frustrating to have people come in, frustrating for them especially, and find out that they've been researching the wrong John Brown because they simply went back to a place in time and in a county found a John Brown and figured that had to be their John Brown. So use that search backward technique from where you are right now, going backward. Record where people were on important and memorable dates. I recorded on the date for September 11, I recorded exactly where all my family members were and the conversations that we had via email and our fears. I was in Canada. My daughter was in Oregon. And I had a sister-in-law in Big Fork, Montana, who was saying, try and get across the border really quickly. I could only get across the border 5 days later. That's when Canada and America were ready to handle those kinds of passages again. And even when I did, there was a totally different thing going on at the border than when I went across that border in Washington. Eureka, Montana was quite serious about our luggage, and I didn't blame them a bit. Look at your data examination techniques. What family lore have you placed in a timeline? Did you prove it? Is it still unproven? Is it a story from one or two people? Do you have stories that conflict with one another from those two people? Now, you can either accept both stories and say, whatever, or hopefully you're going out to take the opportunity to prove that particular story. Remember my story about my relative. That's coming a little later towards the end of this. What kind of evidence might be available for a particular fact you're seeking when you're looking at something that's proven or unproven? You're going to have to go back and look for those primary documents, not hearsay. Never look at hearsay. My Aunt Norma came home from a court battle with her son telling me she had won. I never thought any more about it until I looked at the actual documents in the Lake County Court 30 years later and discovered he had won. I don't know what she was thinking. Look at family histories and county histories, which can point you the way to where you might want to get those primary documents, because they require looking beyond the entry of a family history or a county history. Just yesterday, I had a client come in, pull down a local history book, point to some homesteads that were recorded in the back of the book and say, why can't I find this particular homestead in Glow Records? So we went over to Glow Records and we looked and did not find it as it had been there in the book. And I had to explain that that's a county history. They've attempted there exhaustively to record everyone who ever applied for a homestead, but there's no proof that this particular homestead was actually ever verified at the end and the person got the land. So it turned our search into something quite different. Be aware of that historical context and the impact of what happens when someone relinquishes a homestead, doesn't prove up on it. Where will you find that information? It's available, but you're going to have to look deeper than just the Glow Records Index. Reminder, when you make a timeline, you're making a template for your family story. You can start out and actually use things from your timeline and put them into paragraphs because they take you beyond basic facts, especially if you recorded all those other people involved with that particular wedding. Maybe you'll run across something like a really neat book that records all the people who were at the wedding, and you can at least have a list of those. When you look at being able to put in facts into a database beyond just the basic givens of ancestors, then Roots Magic currently is the place you want to use that particular database because it allows you to record everyone and show those relationships with your family. It does it in a very special place within the database. So timelines, even those on Roots Magic, can provide community context and give you more questions to ask about those past generations. They provide a chronological timeline or an outline for your family, and that's pretty understandable to other people when you're showing them your outline and trying to get them interested in telling you more. I really use my timelines. I type mine, I leave room, I write all over them. To me, they are a working document, not a make pretty document. Be proactive and reflect on that timeline. Am I consulting it as a means to analyze? Oh, you bet I am. I'm taking one of my 19 lines at least once a month, going through it and saying, where do I need to get more data? And how is this timeline pointing me to some other kinds of data that I need to get? And where can I go get it? I'm just waiting to make another mega trip down to Salt Lake City to that fantastic library. I want to make sure that I don't have big gaps in that timeline. So my stepwise progression backward is going to help with that. And also noting the important events for that time period. My grandma, Lee, apparently was very, very depressed when World War II officially started because she'd already seen what had happened when Hitler walked into Poland, and she greatly feared for her boys who were eligible for the draft. I have that single line from her, and it is treasured by all of us in my family. Can I ask my siblings or my cousins, since I didn't ask the right questions for my grandpa and my grandma, about their reactions to a particular event or what they heard from their folks? Ask others, even the descendants of those neighbors who were close to you. They might know all kinds of things and might just be willing to share a whole bunch. Plan to increase your knowledge through books and speakers and workshops. Remember those books by experts. It's really nice to read historical fiction. However, go to the back of the book and find out in the author's explanation what kind of facts were made up. If they've stuck pretty well to a historical timeline, then you're probably okay and you're going to get good things. But otherwise, you're going to have to look for those experts, like our friend Mark Johnson from Great Falls, who's an expert in Montana Chinese immigrants. His books, his first book at least, is wonderful, and the research that he's been providing to Chinese communities in Montana has been fantastic. And he got that archival experience and background by living in China for many years and then coming back and being the historian that he is, researching carefully and recognizing that documents that were in the state repositories here had really great information. It just needed to be translated. So he developed his expertise by examining a particular topic at length. He's consulted with others. You're going to find these experts who are willing to give you that information. Bill Dollarhide is one of my experts. I've talked about his many books before because he's an expert at time and place, and he's an expert at census topics and so many things, and he's become an expert on what's really out there on online resources. We have all of his books in our library, and we update them as he updates his. Recognize you need to read on a subject. Recognize your limited knowledge, but make a plan for yourself to grow. I continually define and redefine my research question, scribble out the part I've found, ask better informed questions based on things I've heard, I hope, and be aware of the fact that if I ask something from today's context and my question doesn't fit the particular era or topic as it was way back when, I need to be getting into that community context in that particular time frame. So I may be naive because of my own background when I first get started, but I can learn, and so can you. So no, you can't get information just by putting the book under your pillow. Didn't work for me anyway. I'm going to remind you of some other places that are free that can give you just a bunch of information. All those one-step searches by Stephen Morse out of his free site, Steve Morse, because his stuff is fantastic. I've given it to you before, but he does censuses, he does naturalizations, he does citizenship, he does all kinds of information about at least 16 different places that our citizens came into the United States. It's not all about New York. And be purposeful in identifying the background knowledge you need or want. Go out and utilize YouTube videos. There's lots of them, and AI is going to help you find them. Look at speakers, and sometimes those speakers put their stuff out for free. Look at workshops like the workshops we're going to have in Montana this fall. Here in Great Falls, did I mention that? Because we will have the Montana Genealogy Conference here. We will have two main speakers for a couple of days, speaking on things you didn't even know you needed to know. I'm looking right now at how the right to vote affected my two grandmas after 1920. I had one grandma who didn't live for very long, only till 1934. Did she vote? I haven't been able to find that. I know that she participated in at least one school election in North Dakota, but school elections allowed for females to vote for a long time before we received that universal vote in the United States for females. Did they volunteer as voter registration helpers? My grandma, Nanny Lee, did. She did, right in Ferndale. So you can look at those voter registration lists and identify all the women. California has fantastic voter registration lists that are out online. They've been out there for a long time. Some Canadian provinces have these too. Frequently, you may see who signed up to vote by looking at your local newspaper. Yeah, they'll report the entire voter registration as of a certain date. So you may find it there also. Look for those friends who were there, who took part and did election or precinct duty during a particular election, because they're the friends and the people that your relations were with. So employ strategies and make good choices. One of my good choices that I make every day is I actively refute bad data. I do not want family lore that's disproven, and I don't want it to get into future family histories. I've got a book here right in our Great Falls library that one of my cousins put in about the family history produced by my liar pants on fire great-grandfather, Bill Bennett. Most of his was made up. It just hurts me when I see the tall tale told in that Lolo book. So I'm careful, I'm respectful, but I'm firm in refuting family stories to other family members. They may not believe me, but hopefully they hear me out. Hopefully they look at my evidence, and hopefully they begin to talk about that particular piece of history differently. And hopefully they do not pass it on. I know I've got a couple of cousins who said Aunt Norma's stuff is way more fun. And I dispel those rumors whenever possible. So now, as a sidebar, I'm going to go back again. Have you verified what you already think you know? Be serious about this. Don't accept it as fact. Go back and look. Make a date with yourself and just look up a fact every once in a while from that history that you received and see if it really was vetted carefully. For my Lee Eskew Nanick families, I recorded the outlandish stories told by my Aunt Margaret Norma. I knew her versions were sometimes varied depending on her audience. The bigger the audience, the bigger the story got. And I then set out to prove for myself first her versions. Every one of her 5 versions that I had recorded that I'd looked with were disproven by my research. She said her father, who was illegitimate, was born over in a place called Rose Hill, Missouri, and that's why there was no birth certificate. Well, there wasn't birth certificates available in Nebraska at that time anyway. And he was born in Nebraska. He affirmed that on many, many documents. And I found a little obtuse note in a newspaper there saying that the Coglizer family had a happy birth event the week before. That's the only thing that I found about my grandfather, because he was illegitimate. But I was able to prove it, that it was untrue. So I try and try again to always give this information. One of my ways is in my little things that I send out to family regarding Aunt Norma's facts. Here's what I've said. My dad's sister Norma was fond of telling family stories, many of them punctuated by her extra facts or hyperbole. Many Lee family members were told her family history versions, and the retellings sometimes became even more spectacular. Again, depending on the audience. In this Lee family history, I am attempting to suss out the facts behind Aunt Norma's stories. Were the things she said true or not? I will recap the story she told, followed by the facts I was able to find. To this point, when I wrote this in 2020, I have not been able to verify the 5 stories I heard her tell. See my research below, and I reported it. As my dad said, his sister said many things besides her prayers. So you'll have people who say they've looked everywhere, or maybe that's your stance. Well, I hoped I'd find it at Ancestry, or I hoped I'd find it when I went into those church records over in the Episcopal Church. I used a bunch of search terms out online, but I just got random stuff. By the way, forgot to use those quotation marks around your terms, and forgot to look carefully at how stuff needs to be searched at a particular area. Maybe I should go back. We have people routinely, weekly in our library come in saying, I thought all this stuff would be online. They got to have bunches of folks scanning and inputting or putting this stuff in, or didn't they put it there where available for me right in the first place? No, they didn't. Or a famous one, I got a subscription to a very most famous site that I will not mention, but I can't find what I want there. It's very confusing. It's hard to research at that place. Well, that particular site or any of our major sites can be very, very confusing if you don't know how to drill down within their data, because they have billions, literally billions of records. So use that table of contents weekly. Go back and look at that site all the time to see if they've collected something else for your state. I mean, I was very surprised when I found in about 2019 that Ancestry had put out all the death documents up through 2018 for Montana. Whoa, I had no idea that was coming. And I always looked for new stuff. I'm telling you about one more kind of directory I found and put in our library this week. Directory of government employees. Yes, there are directories of the people who are in legislature right now, and we have those. We have saved those things. This one happens to be a very important thing that was, well, these people were out of office by the 1870s, but they were the U.S. Congress members, the state legislature members, and so on for freedom's lawmakers, the Black office holders that gained entry to our U.S. Congress during the Reconstruction period after the Civil War. Yes, you will find these things. They might be brief biographies. It might not tell you everything you want to know, but it'll always give you another place to begin searching. So with that, I'm stopping my share.